Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We will begin the webinar in 1 minute. Hello, welcome and thank you for joining us today. We'll get started in just a second with the program, but I want to take a moment to let you know a little bit about how the Oklahoma Manufacturing Alliance is growing stronger in 2021. The Oklahoma Manufacturing Alliance is evolving to a better, more efficient approach in support of state industry and individual manufacturers. One of the ways we want to share that detailed expertise is through these webinars. This is just a brief overview of one of our new programs, Optimizing the Organization, Take It to 10. Of course, we still rely heavily on our network of sponsors and partners. Many of those partners have capabilities and services that complement our goal of making your business more successful. We certainly cannot do it alone. We have many of our sponsors and educational partners here on the call today. Thank you all for those who are joining us. And remember, MEAs are still accessible, and traditional services like problem solving, business connections, and engineering work remain available for manufacturers in all 77 counties. We are still here when you need us. And now on to our webinar, which will be delivered today via recording by its developer, Mr. Shane Barber. Through this event, Shane, as well as Donovan Hensley of the Oklahoma Manufacturing Alliance, will be live and answering your questions as they arise. Please utilize the chat function during the presentation to ask questions, and we will have Q&A with the team afterwards.
Thank you for that introduction. Glad to be here today. And today we're going to be talking about strategy. My name is Shane Barber. I'm with the Business Excellence Group. And we'll be talking about, in terms of strategy, how do you optimize your organization? The key method that we utilize is the Take It to 10 model that is from the burglar method. And so today I'll explain that method. We'll show you some examples of it, and then we'll talk about how what makes strategy successful and what are the pitfalls with it. But again, our model from the Business Excellence Group, if this is your first time joining one of these webinars, our model is what we call the straight six model, which is 6 cylinders as a car analogy. And in those 6 cylinders, each one of these cylinders plays a critical function in your organization. And often there's pain points that result in these cylinders if they're not timed and they're not firing in the direct order that is required for an organization to function the best that it can. And so in this model, strategy is the lead cylinder. That's the topic of today. But as you can see here, all other cylinders fall in behind it. So once your strategy is developed, you have to have a structure that is going to enable it to accomplish it as an organization. With structure, this is where your hierarchy lives, your decision making, and your leadership team is accountable to, and in alignment to the strategy. The next cylinder is people practices. Once you have your structure that's in alignment to the strategy, roles live within that structure. And so this is role clarity. This is all of your people systems that you utilized, from hiring to training, developing, performance managing, up into including even succession planning for the critical positions in your company. So in that third cylinder, if people really aren't enabled and empowered by understanding their roles within the structure that they work in, then they won't be engaged. Methods and tools, this is the fourth cylinder. This is really reducing variance. This is where continuous improvement, tools like lean manufacturing live, and other tools, obviously. And it's really about setting standards and standardizing how work is produced, whether it be products or services. This is really what this cylinder is about. The fifth cylinder is lateral processes. This is how organizations communicate and collaborate towards a common goal, and how they work together cross-functionally, across silos, across departments, and across teams to really deliver the strategy. And then the last cylinder is rewards and metrics. And the saying goes, you get what you measure. And so this is really focusing on measuring the strategic outcomes that you need to be able to achieve the strategy for your organization, and everything in between. And the output of this cylinder is a series of dashboards from company to value stream to work teams to individual. And what are those metrics that tie all the way back to the strategy? Putting common goals in practice, common goals in place where people are working towards them to achieve that strategy. So again, 6-cylinder model. You can see pain points in organizations or in your own organization. Pain points just described as where the organization is not functioning at an optimal level. And we want to try to tie it back to one of these cylinders here, looking for the root cause and kind of, using the car analogy, reading that engine code a little bit from that perspective. Engine codes get thrown, check engine light comes on like the bottom left of your screen. And we want to know, what is that engine light indicating, and what is the symptom, and more importantly, what's the problem of it? And so today, we'll focus our efforts on diagnosing what happens with strategy when it's not clear, it's not communicated, it isn't specific, or measurable, and what are the signs of that, what are the pitfalls, and then what are the fixes for it. So before we get started though, if you've ever asked, or maybe, within the group or to yourself, why do strategies fail? We've all been part of a strategic planning session or putting strategic thoughts on paper, and then we look back at it at some point and we wonder, hey, that just didn't happen. Why is that? Well, most strategic planning efforts, if you've been involved in what is the age-old, what's called the retreat, which was typically done on the weekends because you were too busy doing the tactical work to be able to think strategic, and you've gone off and do a retreat. And a lot of strategic planning starts with vision or mission. And I'm not saying that's not important, but where it fails, it doesn't get broken down into the tangible and measurable objectives and goals that is required to be able to have it succeed or have it flourish. So it has to be tangible and measurable. Again, not that vision and mission aren't important. They are. They're usually well underway in your company. You've done that when you've started your company. You have a mission. You have a vision where you want to be, the product segment, the industry. But it typically lacks the detail required to really move the organization towards an end state destination. So you have to go through the vision. You have to go through the mission, but you really have to come out with a destination. And then, like all strategies that have failed, they become an exercise, and the company becomes a tactical, it's very tactical in nature, and you find yourselves just heads down, focused on delivering the products and services versus balancing delivering of the products and services that grow the company and develop it further. So that's where companies suffer. They get trapped in the tactical. And then lastly, it's essential for a company to be optimized, to have it tangible, measurable for all future planning. And also it has to be communicated. People need to know about it. So various reasons why strategies fail. I know I've been involved in ones that have, but I've certainly learned from those, and these are typical. The role of leadership, not like you don't know your role, but in terms of strategy, values, vision, and mission, like this picture here on your screen, those are all important. They're pieces of the puzzle, but you got to have this strategic direction that locks into those other three that really can drive a company to the next step. Once that's done, it really is defining the culture, where you want to be, how you want to be there, how you want to get there, and who is going to propel it there, and how you're going to behave. How you're going to behave, and of course, measuring it. So you got to establish a strategic direction as a leader, but you need time to do it. And often we get sucked down into the daily. You got to develop the tactics to achieve the plan. And that can be cumbersome for some. You know, a lot of visionary people want to set the strategy. Here's where we need to be. And I'm going to turn it over to my team to create the how we're going to get there. And that is part of this process. It's part of our process. This is engaging your leadership team so they can help you take your strategy to action. But you got to develop those tactics to achieve the plan. You also have to communicate and empower people to do that and pursue those objectives on their own. But they first need to know, what does this strategy mean to them? What does it mean to their job? And where can they put their talent and time to help the organization move towards that destination? Too many times I've heard senior leaders say, well, I'm the expert on strategy. I don't buy in that all employees need to know where the company's headed and how we're going to get there. And that's just a difference of opinion. Wherever I've led large organizations, which I've done quite a lot in my career and also as a consultant, the more you can engage everybody in the organization at a level that's relevant to their role, then they can understand where they can do with their time and talent to get the organization to that destination. And lastly, we got to hold ourselves, our leadership teams, and all of our employees accountable to achieving the plan. And that takes rigor, that takes structure, and we'll talk about some of that structure. So role of leadership is essential for strategy, engaging our teams, engaging our people, and driving a culture that we intend to really obtain, versus normally how it happens with companies is the strategy fades, the culture becomes something that we don't like or aspire to have, and we get frustrated and we go tactical. So if we can diagnose each cylinder in this analogy with the check engine lights coming on, let's diagnose the strategy, the strategy cylinder here, so to speak, and look at the common problems. Common problems in organizations that we see every single day, and I know you see it, is confusion within your own organization. Confusion is literally where a division, a department, two employees on the same team, different teams, they don't know what to work on next. They don't know where the company's going. They don't know if the company is succeeding or failing. They don't know if the company is going to be around, you know, for 10 years or 10 minutes. And often that causes angst in the organization. And often companies are doing great work. They are succeeding, but the employees don't know it. And so they deserve to know where the company's going. They deserve to know where leadership is really trying to drive the company towards this end destination. But to do that, you have to have this North Star, so to speak. So you have to have this end destination, and it's always a moving target, much like when you're traveling, you're going on vacation, you want to go to this destination, you know, for this time of year's vacation, and you might keep going to another or a different destination, you know, in another event. And so much like that, we got to have this North Star guiding us, and we got to stay steady to that North Star, base our plans on it, create a project plan with milestones, dates, timing, deliverables, and that often is problematic. If we just manage strategy like we do products within manufacturing companies or new product development with a solid project plan, that's half the battle. The other common problems is leaders and managers, they do not work together to reach a common destination. Often it's because they don't know or they don't agree with it. They're not aligned to it. And so we got to get leaders and managers aligned to that end destination, aligned to that strategy, and then have common goals and metrics to be able to achieve them. When those goals and metrics aren't being met, that's another symptomatic issue that exists in organizations. And so common metrics drives common behavior. And so when you get done with strategy and you have strategic objectives and goals developed, you got to add the metrics to it. If the metrics aren't being met, it's often because it's either the wrong metric, the metric hasn't been defined, or you have a leadership alignment issue. And then lastly, companies really spend the time looking down a lot because it's hard. They're tactically executing to your product set, getting it out to the end customer on time at the right quality while you're safe and cost conscious. But you also have to balance that with growth and planning of your company. I know this is all things you've seen. These are all things you know, and I don't mean for this to be a leadership 101. That is not it. It's just the common problems, but we often lose sight. Sometimes we don't see them. So it's about looking. If you look for them, you're most likely to find them. But what do they cause in your organization? A lack of strategic planning drives tactical execution. And often you can tactically execute and end up in a destination that you never wanted to achieve. And some good, some bad. So if organizations don't take the time to plan, they won't have a strategic plan. Objectives and goals aren't set, just by happenstance. You got to spend the time planning. You got to develop those objectives. You got to put goals to them, and then you got to be able to measure those goals. So lack of metrics and measures can cause this as well. And then the organization, if it doesn't know where they're headed, the people in your organization, then it's going to cause misalignment, and people are going to try their best in their job, but they're going to guess what they should do next. Often they'll come to you and say, hey boss, what is next? What should I be doing next? Or what's the priority I should be doing? Or, I'm overwhelmed because I have so many things I'm working on. But when we start to ask people, what are you working on and why? Often it's because that's what they feel is important. And that can be, often more times than not in alignment where the company needs to be. It's no fault of them. It's fault of us as leaders not setting that common direction. So what are the fixes? We can assess this, we can find the causes, and what are the fixes? It's really getting the larger part of your leadership team engaged, or your organization. I've had a lot of senior leaders say, I'm the expert of strategy, and I developed that. I say, no doubt, that is your role. And that's what we should be doing as leaders. But to get strategy to action and actually follow through, it takes a village to move it. It takes a leadership team. No matter if you only have 2 other members on your team, the 3 of you team together, get into alignment, create the strategy, create the milestones, the plan to be able to get to that destination. You got to create strategic objectives and assign metrics. You can't leave strategy at a visionary level, so high up, 30,000 foot view, that people don't know what the connecting cities are to get to that destination. In this traveling analogy here. And so you got to really have these strategic objectives, assign metrics, and then you create a project plan based off of that. With that, you can determine quarterly goals and priorities. You can break down those quarterly goals to monthly goals and monthly priorities, to weekly goals, weekly priorities, right down to day. And I know a lot of, there's mixed things on strategic plans. New product introduction can be in a strategic plan. And that's really easy to see broken down into daily, weekly, or weekly, daily, to where you're executing on that introduction and you're doing the R&D work today. Now you're revising that design. Now you're moving it into production. Now you're refining it. That's really easy to see. Other things that you might be putting in your strategic plan could be less tangible, less obvious to break it down by week. But if you can break down into smaller goals over your 18 to 36 months of your strategic plan, then you can start measuring those and achieve that. And then you got to monitor and measure the results frequently. A lot of companies will say, yeah, we have a strategy, and we usually check into it a couple times a year. And I'll ask them, well, how often does information change in your organization? You're probably thinking it changes every day. It does. So shouldn't you be monitoring and measuring the results more timely, more frequent than less frequent? I highly recommend that you're checking in on your strategy every 2 weeks, because what you're checking in on is the project plan and those milestones. And we'll talk about that in a bit here today. But here's the common fixes. But if I left us here, okay, great. I'm not telling you something you didn't know, but what we want to deliver to you today is a simple method on how we partner with companies and how you can get this strategy and get it turned around. But first, let's clarify, what's the purpose it serves for our organization? Well, it sets what we're going to accomplish. It sets up the organization, what it needs to accomplish, what is required to accomplish, over the longer time frame versus over a week's work. So we like to plan 18 to 36 months because information and manufacturing changes so often. We're not saying you do a new strategic plan every 18 to 36 months, but you set your initial plan and then you're checking in on it multiple times per month through a leadership review on milestone management. And then at the end of a quarter, you measure it. You look at what you've accomplished, what you need to accomplish, set it for the quarter. Then you look at the year, and every year you measure it, evaluate it, and then continue to reset it, continue to push it out. It also looks at a good strategy should look at where you're going to compete, where you need to compete, where are you currently competing, and whom are you competing against. And we'll dive into this one deeper today. And then who are you going to serve? What is your clients that you're serving in the market that you're in, the industry that you're at, that you're working within? And then how are we going to win? Win as in optimize your company, win as in achieve the strategy, win as in achieve your metrics that you set your company up to go perform to. So this is what the function of strategy. It's really setting that North Star of what we're going to accomplish, how we're going to accomplish it, whom we compete with, we serve, and then how we're going to win. The model that we use is called the burglar model. It's a real simple model. There's a lot of strategic planning tools out there. There is, SWOT analysis that seems real popular. The SWOT analysis is very, very detailed, which is great. It looks at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, your threats, what SWOT stands for, if you're not familiar. But it can take some time. It can be really cumbersome. Not saying it's not to use it. It's just something I choose not to. We like to use a shorter duration, not 3 to 5 years out. We like to use 18 to 36 months out. And we also like to use a simpler model. So this model, it starts at the top of the diamond, what it takes to win, what industry you're in, and what does it take to win in the industry, no matter whom you are. When you go into this part of this model, you got to analyze who is your competition in the market. How does your company compete? And if you analyze that, you can understand the basis of your competitive advantage and your differentiation. That can later be used for marketing. That can be used for how you talk to companies different, or stakeholders different, customers differently. But you really need to know it. So many companies, they may know their competition, but they don't know what they do differently or better than their competition, and vice versa, so they can understand what it will take for them to improve. The bottom of this diamond, after you complete that first step, then it's, then you got to take inventory of what are you currently doing today that's enabling you to win, or what do we have? What do we have in our company that's enabling us to win? And it's your distinct competence of the company that you're utilizing to be able to get the results you are today, and then understanding what you need to really change and do differently to be able to get that. Then you go to the left of this model, it says what we say. You come out with a strategy, but it can't just be words. It can't be a world-class organization in the industry we serve, measured by the following. I'd like the measurement piece, but you got to define it down to the strategic objective level. At our company, we have to continue to manage our legacy products. We have to bring on new technology development. We have to engage our workforce and retain them. And we have to have quality and safety practices and principles in place so we can meet our commitments safely, on time, with the right quality. And that's a good communication, but then we have to break it down into action. And what do we do to achieve those things? So on the far right, you got to break it into strategic objectives and goals. So this process, or this visual, this model defines that. But now let's look at how do we go off and execute this model. So first off, I'd mentioned, first it starts with understanding our competitors, to understand the advantage and how we differentiate ourselves as a company. And so competitive advantage is important. It sets you apart from anybody else, and it's how you compete in the industry that you serve. And so there's examples here: low-cost leadership, product and service leadership, customer intimacy, whatever your advantage is. But so many companies don't know whom they compete against, and then what their advantage is. And so in this process, we analyze and partner with you and analyze your competition quickly. And then we come back out of that process within a day to understand what your advantage is, to be leveraged to be able to win in the industry. Bottom right, then you got to look at how you compete, but how do you differ from your competition? Do you perform similar activities better? Do you perform similar activities differently than they do? Or do you do different activities altogether? Activities, products, services, and how you differentiate against your competition. So, as you're seeing here, it doesn't start with vision and mission. We're going to assume that's already in place. If it's not, we'll touch on it. But we really want to touch on the industry you serve and work within, the companies you compete against, and how do you differentiate yourselves and strive for this competitive advantage. So that's part of the process. To emphasize that the competitive advantage and value proposition to your customer, we pulled an example from the book Blue Ocean Strategy. If you haven't read it, it's simple. A blue ocean strategy is you're striving for a strategy where you're the apex predator in a blue ocean. You're not fighting the competition when the market is saturated. You are, really, you have your competitive advantage in this blue ocean, so to speak. And to create a blue ocean strategy, you got to look at what you're going to do differently and the value you're going to bring. If you look at Cirque du Soleil versus Ringling Brothers, when Cirque du Soleil came out, they understood in the industry they serve, on the bottom of this graph, price, star performers, animal acts, traditional three-ring shows, aisle concessions, clown acts, tents or venue, classic acrobatic performance, multiple performances, and intellectual sophistication and richness. And so they understood that these are some of the attributes that the circus industry competitors are striving for. And then they started to really look at where do they want to raise the value proposition for the customer, and where do they want to lower some things to differentiate themselves. You can follow the graph, but Ringling Brothers really centered around traveling tents, star performers, animal acts, traditional three-ring shows. And Cirque du Soleil, if you've ever been to one, really focus in that the intellectual sophistication of the theme. The venues are amazing, everything from swimming pools and diving acts to acrobatics, and then really multiple performances in a day at a fixed location, of which now they do have traveling shows, but in big venues where they bring stages with that sophistication with them. Has Cirque du Soleil competed in this market well against Ringling Brothers? The proof is in the pudding. Ringling Brothers' last performance, I believe, was in 2017, and it was largely based off of the animal acts and the animal cruelty that went with it. And now people enjoy a different type of circus, in the industry, and Cirque du Soleil is leading in that industry. So this is just an example of what we take manufacturing clients through to understand whom they compete with, what are the attributes at the bottom here that it takes to win in the industry you serve, and then look at your competitors, plot them together, and understand where you have a competitive advantage and distinct differentiation between what you do over them. Next, once we've understood what those attributes, what winning is, we describe that in box one here. What does winning look like in the industry we serve? So it might be bullets. It looks like you got to have cost leadership. You got to constantly be revising your technology every 18 months to compete. Where I came from, the semiconductor industry. It could be dog toy manufacturers, and you have different challenges than other industries. And so you capture those attributes like that we surface in looking at your competition, what it takes to compete in your industry that you serve. And then we have a criteria to really judge our company against. In step two on the left side, what does it take to win, for us to win as a company against the criteria that it takes everybody in the industry to be able to compete against? And so then we fill this column out and we brainstorm that for about a day. What does it take for our company to win in the industry we serve? And we fill all that out. We surface everything from quality systems to operational execution to workforce development, because of the challenges with employees and finding and retaining good employees, to technology, to pivoting to different technologies because changes in our environment, like COVID. You saw a lot of companies like distillers, in their small strategy, quickly they pivoted. What did they do and what it takes to win? They had an equipment set. They could distill, isopropyl alcohol or a version of alcohol for disinfectant, for COVID, and they did. And a lot of companies did rather well with that, or pivoted to make face masks if they were in cut and sew operations, or dealing with fabrics. And so we brainstorm this in this second column, what it takes to win, and we do that for about a day. And then the remaining of the 2 days of a 3-day intensive strategy development session, then we ask ourselves in step three, what do we currently have, or what do we got that's enabling us to win? So what are we doing right? And we list all of that. And then we go to step four, what is the gap? What do we need? What do we need to put in place to be more successful and win in our industry? And then once that step 4 is done, then we'll create the step of the gap closing actions. Once we have those gap closing actions, then we'll put a confidence level against every action. As you can imagine, within about 2 days of brainstorming, we have tons of things that we could be working on as a company. Too many things, we could argue. And so we simply put this little confidence level in place. We have your leadership team that we work with in this session. And we say, out of all these gap closing actions, what's our confidence level that, these 22 items will deliver, our company to really winning in our industry. And so we rate them on a 10 scale. That's why we call it take it to 10. 10 is optimizing your company. And so we look at those brainstorm gap closing actions, we rate them for confidence level, and what that does is sort out our priorities. Step 7, within 3 days, we have strategic objectives. Those are your gap closing action themes that run across this entire template here and this entire planning process. And we have strategic objectives, and then we can put milestones and metrics to it. But let me keep with this example. And so in these steps, this is just the same template. We're just looking at it a little bit different. And we brainstorm these 7 steps. But if you take first pass quality, let's say world-class quality was a strategic objective of your strategic plan over the next 3 years. And so what we first do, once we have quality as that topic, or as that strategic objective area, then we'll brainstorm horizontally. We'll go across this model and go to step 3 and say, what are we currently doing that is enabling us to win? What do we need to have in place to win? What is our gap? What is our gap closing actions? And we'll fill this all out on world-class quality or industry class quality. And so we know now what we're doing well. We'll know what our gaps are, our gap closing actions, and then that is what we'll put a confidence level to, so we can identify the top strategic objectives that will be required over 18 to 36 months to enable your company to win in step 7. And so we'll fill out, and you're left with this template, and you have it all on one page. It's a really simple, easy, once the end product is done, to look at strategy on one page. After you get done with that level where you have strategic objectives and the details that will enable each objective to be accomplished, you have to ask yourself, what is the organizational capability required to achieve the strategy? Examples of these are people, property, plant, equipment, and technology. So how does this work? First, you review your strategic planning outcomes, and by each line, world-class quality as an example, we would look at what do we need to be able to achieve that? Do we need to bring in Six Sigma, because the sophistication of our product line and the variance that we can't have? Do we, need to bring in a quality, develop a quality management system? So that's an example of technology or a process. But it also could be that way with people, skills and training. Property can be, you need to have to expand, if it was to expand a service line or a product line and run a higher volume, you might have to install a better layout for pulling trucks into the dock and out of the dock, so you don't create a traffic jam. In the 4 walls of your plant, you might need expanding your delivery bay doors to where you can back trucks up to, or you might need to change your plant layout. And then equipment, and what types of equipment. If you're in the machining industry, you might need to make that jump from 3-axis to 4-axis to 5-axis. If it's so intricate of the designs your customers are asking for, 3D metal printing might be an example of organizational capability you would need. And then lastly, technology. Utilizing technology within your current or future projects to either produce them or technology itself that you're developing. So that's one thing you don't want to have happen. I had this happen about a year ago with a client. We completed a complete strategic plan, and then we stepped back and looked at the org capability. They were resistant. No, we can do all this. I said, well, let's exhaust this process and really look at the capabilities by each one of these categories. And what they found was they could advance their technology so far, but they didn't have the people capacity and they didn't have the financial means to be able to do it. And so we had to take it off of their strategic plan at this time. And so it was kind of a ending the session versus a positive. We have a strategy and we're going to charge for this destination. It was, we have all the means to be able to create this technology, but we don't have the capability to make it happen. So it just was not, it wasn't no forever. It was just no, just not now, and how we can do that. So that's an example there. When we're all done, we come out with these 4 strategic objectives, 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 here, and they can be phased by quarter, by year, but 8's a little much. And so this example, why I said 4 off the top of my head, I like a 4 to 5 number, to the point where we have a strategic objective. We define what it is for your company, world-class quality as an example. We have objectives, goals, and metrics, and we can explain and tell the story of why it's important, how we're going to do it, who it affects, and the timeline that we have to execute to it. And so you can imagine if we had this planning process done, you would have technology innovation, you would have world-class quality, you may have legacy product execution, you might have workforce development and engagement. And so all those would be examples of 4 strategic objectives, and then you would have to create a project plan with goals and objectives below that. From that standpoint, the whole intent is that you come out of your strategy with tangible, measurable goals and objectives that you can tell a story and communicate to your organization, so they can put their time and talent to helping you achieve it. With that, it was pretty quick today. We're mean for these webinars to be short, to leave you enough time to ask questions for this. And so, for today's purposes, we're gonna open it up to question and answers, and then we'll talk about our upcoming next webinar, which will be how do you take your strategy to action. So I'm going to turn this back to our moderator so they can open up your questions, and then we'll start fielding those and taking those as we go. Again, my name is Shane Barber with the Business Excellence Group. Thank you so much for your time, and hopefully this helps you with understanding and how to diagnose when your strategy it needs to be formalized, what it causes if it's not, how to look for the symptoms and fix it at the root cause level with a simple, easy method with you and us as a partner. Turn it back to our moderator, and thanks again.
All right, we now have time for Q&A with Shane as well as Donovan Hensley with the Oklahoma Manufacturing Alliance. If you all have any questions from our presentation today.
I'm going to toss one over the fence to Shane, if that's all right. Shane, are you still there?
I am.
Cool. So this is a 2.5 to 3 day process. Can you just walk us through kind of day 1, day 2, day 3?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Like in the materials we shared here today, first day is about understanding your competition and really creating a really clear understanding amongst your leadership team on who your competitors are, how you differentiate your company goods and services from everybody else.
That's that Bergelman model you.
Yep. And going through probably the very top of that model and understanding that. And while a lot of leaders of organizations would say, well, I know exactly who our competitors are and I know what our differentiation is, the big question I'd have for everybody is, does your leadership team know? Are they consistent? Do they look, many companies only look inward, they don't look outward. And so we start that process looking a little bit outward, comparing ourselves. And it's actually a morale booster. It actually, people are really get excited and into it of where they are winning over the competition that they have. But that's day 1. We start to really define what winning looks like with that. So we put that definition, and then where we end and conclude that first day is we just have a mega brainstorm on, okay, great. If this is what winning, what is required to win in the industry you serve, then we'll brainstorm what are we currently doing that's enabling us to win. And so we'll create that vertical list in that first column. And then at the end of that day, we break right there. If we're done, I've never had a group that's finished, before, and with about an hour to spare, because it's usually a really robust process of engagement of your leadership team. but we'll call it there. Reason being is it's just a rough brainstorm. When we go into day 2, the facilitator would put that into the themes. You'll see natural themes come out: quality, safety, workforce, technology improvements, operational excellence, are ones from I did a couple weeks ago. And you'll see those themes. And then that's in day 2, you have those themes already with the brainstorm items attached to each theme. And then we start going horizontally across to say, okay, what are we currently doing that's enabling us to win in quality efforts? What are our gaps? What are gap closing actions? And so that second day, we take every single theme, we go and brainstorm what we're currently doing, our gaps, and then gap closing actions. That might take us into midday, day 3. In day 3, we continue that process. And then as we conclude, that's where we surface the strategic objectives, the what is required to achieve them from those brainstorms, and to close those gaps. And then we start the prioritization. And when we finish that prioritization, we conclude the 3 days with a company's 5, maybe 6 strategic objectives for them to start really putting a robust planning process against over the next couple weeks, so they can come out with an 18 to 36 month plan. So that's the 3 days, and that's the flow.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Other questions, Stacy or Troy, that's on the line? What questions do you have about this process, or how does it feel in your organization today? If you're like me, you got to remember to take that mute off.
They can't take the mute off, unfortunately, since we are in webinar mode. So I've got them muted. They can type in the chat if they have any additional questions.
Shane, as they may be typing up some of their questions here, we've done maybe 30, 35 holistic business assessments over the last, 4 months maybe. And to me, the common theme is coming out of here is an absence, or let's just say a neglect of strategy. I don't mean that use the word harsh, but that seems to be probably one of the biggest things that presidents, owners, CEOs of companies tend to overlook. However, if you ask them, do you have a strategy for your company? 100% of the time, they're going to say yes. So I look at this kind of like, if I were to ask somebody on here, do you have a strategy for your lawn care this summer? They say, yeah, I'm going to mow it once a week. Okay, that's a good goal to have, but is that really truly a strategy? We run into that same issue with businesses. Everybody's going to say that we have a strategy. We're going to get quality parts built on time and shipped on time every time. Well, that's a good goal to have. That's not necessarily a strategy. So the more we start picking apart and coming up with and asking questions about strategic objectives, accountabilities, responsibilities tied to that, does every team member within your org chart understand how their role is tied to helping achieve that strategy? Then they start to look inward and say, well, I thought I had a strategy, but I really didn't. I mean, is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it's very, very common. More times than not, when you probe deeper, like you just demonstrated, leadership will say they have a strategy. If they say it in front of their leadership team, you just got to watch the faces. The faces will tell you what they have or not. And more times than not, it's a goal. I was doing a group about 6 months ago, an assessment where we were drilling down on this topic. And they said, yeah, we have a strategy. I was like, great. Can you share with me the 5, 6 strategic objectives that you have on what is required to achieve the strategy? And they said, well, yeah, it's simple. It's to make sure that we ship everything that we have on our schedule and all of our demand. I said, well, that's a goal, not a strategy. How are you ensuring that you ship everything that you have in your demand? And how are you making sure you have demand? And that is more strategic. And so it's very common to have goals, not strategies. Also very common, if they do have a strategy that they've spent time on, it doesn't get past the leadership seat. and it's not openly shared, talked about, or understood. Understood is another key word. And when you're looking at those faces, and you can try this, Stacy or Troy, if you're still on the line in your teams, just ask the question, hey, what's the strategy we have to grow our company's capabilities over the next 18 to 36 months, and watch the faces. And those faces will tell you that if you have one or not, if they understand it or not, or they're in alignment or not. So that is, very common there. Very common there. I see Troy, you put in, I appreciate this. You said, I often run into managers that confuse mission statement. Yeah, notice in the materials today, we did not say the first thing we do is we start at your vision and then we start at your mission. You saw a slide that had a puzzle pieces. Those are important. Vision is where you want to be. Mission is what you got to do to get there, but it's often a wordsmithed sentence that is not specific enough to really tell the organization what, why, when, how, and who is going to deliver that strategy at what time. And so that's definitely a huge one. And how do you differentiate it? It's literally that. It's the how we are going to deliver the mission. And that how could be, let's just keep going with this theme on world-class quality. It could be 20 different things that have to happen over the next 3 years to make sure that your first pass quality or escapes to customer, or you have zero quality incidents, zero rework, zero scrap rate to achieve that. So that's part of it. It's the how. Then you have to have the what is required to achieve that quality improvement. So you have to have a quality system. You have to have buddy checks. You have to have inspection steps in the process, not at the end of the process. Then you have to have when those items, which are milestones, and when, and what are the predecessor activities, what are the post activities, and then lastly, who owns each milestone, each improvement, each step to accomplish that strategy. So that's where it gets fairly, I don't want to say complicated, but intense past a mission statement. So to differentiate it, you have to have a clear plan. It'd be like jumping in a car. I want to go to San Francisco. Great, point A to point B, mission statement. One of my favorite artists in the 80s, No Sleep Till Brooklyn. Let's say I'm going to Brooklyn, right? And so that's a mission statement. We're going to get there and we're going to drive straight through. But what are the stops? What are the milestones? How you're going to win? What have you have to achieve to be able to get there, at the time frame you want and the condition you want, and more importantly, with the growth that you need. So you got to differentiate it by that how, what, when, and who. And that is definitely part of this process and part of the strategy to action process. Great question. Thank you, Troy, for adding that. Other questions?
That was a good explanation, Shane. If I look at my grass, my yard out here, and I have a vision to let's just say have the best looking yard within the county. And then I have a mission to teach my daughter, the importance and the values of maintaining a yard and growing plants, having a green thumb, that type of thing. But what you said about how do you do it? What do I need to do? What needs to take place? When you start looking at strategic objectives, I think of things like fertilizer. I got to have a herbicide. I got to do a soil test. I need a lawnmower. I need a lawnmower that runs. So what are all the things that are required to put all that together?
Yep, absolutely. All good steps. And like you said, Donovan, just a simple example about companies have vision and mission. If you don't, then there's probably some time we'd invest in that. I have gone to 3-day strategy sessions and they haven't had either of those. So I've said, okay, the plan's the plan till the plan changes. Let's start at vision. Let's start at mission. It might take them all the way back to their business plan that they did when they formed the company. That's okay. But more times than not, people have a vision, they have a mission, and we do prep. Prior to going into a session, we sit with the senior leader that is employing us to go help them or partnering with them and say, what is your vision, where you need to be in 3 years? What is the mission you currently have? How does that need to change? And get that very well communicated. And we open up the session with that. But we don't need to necessarily drag the entire team through that process. Let's just revive it, refresh it, and state it. And then we can start right into the how. how are we going to go meet this in the next 18 to 36 months? So very, very good process there. And simple's easier. So, the grass kind of example, it's very simple. But where the wheels fall off is people say, oh, our business is much more technical than that. The planning process isn't though. I've done this for dog toy manufacturers, 3-person UPS store to a company that was doing $40 billion a quarter. And so it's the same process. Keep it simple. Your leaders will engage. They'll give you the how, when, what, and who should be doing it. And then it's their plan as well if you engage them. So very good topic of discussion here. Other questions or comments about this creating a strategy?
Shane,
Yeah.
Stacy said that this presentation was awesome and thank you. And so wanted to let the group know April 8th, we will be doing our next presentation. It'll be over strategy to action. All of our webinars that are prepared are on our website now. You can register for those through July. All of them will be free. So you're more than welcome to go ahead and register for those events. Again, April 8th, 10 a.m. Our next presentation will be strategy to action.
That session will go deeper in the planning process and how you ignite this strategy and accomplish it. So if that's a place where you're at and you need to start at, webinar is good for you. Donovan, I'll turn it back to you in a second, but at the end of the day, wherever you need help, you have our email, where the OMA sits. We'll be glad to partner with you, whether it be create a strategy, take your strategy, put it into, action, or any other improvement area there. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Donovan, for conclusion, and then we'll see you on the 8th.
Yeah. And, part of the purpose behind these webinars too is, going, and this will be less than 45 seconds, I promise. Starting last June, we started, updating our business model. And historically, people have referred to us as the grant people, the tax credit people, and we are that too, to some extent, but really we became a manufacturing consultant at a deeper level, not just at a connector level, but also somebody who comes on site and implements this stuff right here that we're talking about. So, OMA is now a consultant that delivers things like a strategy. Most consultants look in the tools and methods category when they think of efficiencies, processes, Lean, Six Sigma out on the shop floor, but we look at a business holistically and address everything upstream and downstream from that. So that was just my parting statement. So that's all I got, everybody. Thank you for the attendance. Thank you for the interaction, and we'll see you in a few more weeks.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And again, if you have any questions, you can reach out to any of us. Our website is okalliance.com. You can reach out to me via email, jessica.mug@okalliance.com, and I'd be more than happy to connect you. Thank you all so much, and you have an excellent day.
Everybody.